So our first speaker is Barbara KIRSHENBLATT-GIMBLETT, who is a revered colleague, and I'm not reading everybody's bios just in the spirit of time, but everybody's bio is in your book. Barbara KIRSHENBLATT-GIMBLETT is Skyping in with us from Warsaw, Poland. Barbara has been the great scholar, partner, colleague, who has envisioned and brought forth the great core exhibition of POLIN, the Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw, which opened in October. And I was very fortunate to be able to be there for the opening and see the amazing core exhibit. We couldn't imagine doing a KAJM conference without honoring Barbara, who in past years has been the scholar in residence for KAJM conferences. So I'd just like a round of applause for Barbara. The Museum POLIN, Museum of the History of Polish Jews, is an absolute masterpiece and a game changer in how Jewish museums and museums in general will be seen for at least the next couple of decades, if not more. It was created through an incredible partnership between government of Poland and several other private organizations. It's kind of a miracle, and it's across from the amazing monument to the heroes of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in Warsaw over what was part of the Jewish ghetto. And it is sacred ground upon which an amazingly modern and future-looking museum has been built. Barbara, in your work on developing the plans for POLIN, we'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you studied the Polish people and what aspirations you had for the Polish people to engage with you around 1,000 years of Jewish history in Poland. And in what respect do you feel some of your work was also acting as a change agent socially in Poland and in Europe? So if you could address that for us. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here. I hope that the sound is okay. I can't tell from my end if you can hear me okay. So let me just check that first.
Good. It's good.
Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Well, let me put it this way. This is an initiative that actually came from a Jewish NGO, and they were inspired in 1993 by the opening of the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And I do believe that great museums are agents of transformation. And I was intrigued by your opening comments speaking to the American situation, because the situation in Europe is really different, and in Poland especially. So what does it mean for a museum to be an agent of transformation in Poland today? And I see it as an agent of transformation not only for Polish society, but also for Jews in Poland today, and also for Jews abroad. I actually think this museum has an enormous role to play for precisely the millennials that you've mentioned, and for your audiences. The audiences that come to the Jewish museums in North America are also potential audiences for POLIN Museum, and I do believe that we can have an impact not only here in Poland, but I would like to think internationally. I think that this really is an international museum. I like to say that it's a museum of the history of Polish Jews in the nation's capital on a world stage. And in fact, the core exhibition was the responsibility of the Jewish NGO here in Poland, the Association of the Jewish Historical Institute of Poland, and they were responsible for telling the story and raising the money, and most of the money came from American Jewish donors. So this really is a collaborative project. It's a project across the Atlantic and beyond. And what does it mean for it to be an agent of transformation? So just very briefly, I would say that for Poland itself, it's a perspective on the history of Poland that is very fresh, very, very new. And it means essentially that the history of Poland is not complete without a history of Polish Jews, and that Polish Jews and their history are an integral part of the history of Poland. Now that means that we are actually the only history of Poland museum in the country, believe it or not. We are the only museum of Polish history. There is no museum of Polish history, at least not yet. And in fact, probably there wouldn't even have been an initiative for one if not for us. Because if they don't create one, we're the only one. But what's really incredibly important about our museum is that it's a museum of Polish history that is not a museum of the Polish nation, of the Polish state, which is what a new museum of Polish history will be. And what that means is that our Polish visitors see the many ways of being Jewish in the history of Polish Jews, and can reflect on the many ways of being Polish, one of which ways is by being Jewish. And that is a very, very big step. A second very big step is that the history of Polish Jews has been largely understood in Poland as a history of Polish-Jewish relations. A history of Polish-Jewish relations is not a history of Polish Jews. That phrase, Polish-Jewish relations, is actually generally, not always, but generally a euphemism for anti-Semitism. And the history of Polish Jews is not a history of anti-Semitism. It's something else. And that is really a gift that we can offer. And why is that so important? It's incredibly important because Poland was the epicenter of the genocide. And in a sense, it's already a Holocaust museum. It really doesn't need a Holocaust museum as such. This is, in a sense, site-specific Holocaust museum just right from birth, so to speak. And in essence, the Holocaust has completely overshadowed the 1,000-year history of Polish Jews, and that's completely understandable. And so to recover the history of Polish Jews on this site is an enormously important thing to do. And what I think of the museum as completing the memorial complex, that until we opened the building in 2013, when we wanted to remember and to honor the memory of those who died, we went to the monument and remembered how they died. But when but the task of memory is not complete unless we also honor them by remembering how they lived for 1,000 years. And so it is in that way that the museum completes the memorial complex by honoring those who died and those who came before and those who came after, by remembering how they lived and how they lived not for 4 years, not for 6 years, not for the 20th century, but for 1,000 years of continuous Jewish presence in this place. Now that's an extremely important message for American Jews who have identified Poland almost exclusively with the Holocaust and with, in quotation marks, Polish anti-Semitism. And for those who are willing to take that very big step and come, it will be a revelation for them, because in many ways it's a mitzvah to recover this 1,000-year history. This 1,000-year history is an enormous legacy to past and future generations. The future of, if you will, the future of future generations of American Jews needs to rest not only on Judaism and not only on Israel and not only on Holocaust, it needs also to rest on the legacy of the 1,000-year history of Polish Jews, which was once the largest community, Jewish community in the world, a center of the Jewish world. And in essence, we estimate 70% of Jews in the world today actually can trace their roots to this place. And so we think that we have huge potential to be an agent of transformation, not only in Poland, but also for Jews around the world, and especially in North America, where there is such a very, very large Jewish community.
Thanks, Barbara. Barbara, did you want to show a few images of...
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So, and that's going to do quite quickly, because it'll give you a sense of how we do what we say we're going to do. And I just need to check that you can see them. And we need our tech people here. Share screen. And here I got it. And the question is, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Okay, so basically the key to this project was its relationship to the monument. And you can see that very clearly here. The monument, as you know, has two sides. On one side, facing the building, is the commemoration of the fighters in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And on the other side is a commemoration of the great deportation of 300,000 Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto in the summer of 1942. The building is an award-winning architectural achievement of the Finnish architect Miri Maklamaki, the winner of the international competition. And everything about the building says essentially light, reflection, transparency, and openness. It's a glass building, and I think of it as a, if you will, a statement of hope in the face of tragedy. And it's an extraordinary building for its, if you will, minimalism and discreetness and restraint on the outside, and all the drama is on the inside. The inside is a complete contrast with the geometry of the outside, which echoes the form of the building. And inside, this very dramatic interior is organic, filled with light, number one, and its organic shapes, and warm, a kind of sandstone effect created by a technique called shotcrete, which is literally the shooting of a concrete mixed with quartz crystals from a hose onto an armature, which is how they were able to achieve these wonderful undulating forms, which are quite inspired by the Judean desert and by, I would say, biblical references. For this Finnish architect, this was very, very important. The core exhibition is really a theater of history. I think it was a theater of history. We really created it on the rubble of the ghetto, on the rubble of Millennial, which was the Jewish neighborhood in Warsaw, which was also home to the largest Jewish community in Europe. The Nazis, the Germans, destroyed the ghetto, destroyed the neighborhood, reduced it to rubble after suppressing the uprising. And so we are really rising from the rubble, which means that we have no historic buildings. We didn't start with a collection, but we did start with the story. And we started with the premise that we would use every available method and means and material to tell that story, including original objects, but not confined to them. And so I show you the wooden synagogue and the painted ceiling and the bima. The bima is 100% scale. The painted ceiling and timber-framed roof is 85% scale. And what we've done is, whatever we're lacking in material heritage, we make up for in what I would call intangible heritage. I think of this theater of history being really a set, a place for intangible heritage. For, in this particular case, the recovery of the knowledge of how to build this structure by using traditional techniques, materials, and tools to do that. And the recovery of that intangible heritage is of enormous value. We don't tend to think of museums in those terms, but it's a social action that involved over 300 volunteers, and it's a social action that was conducted in 7 different cities in Poland. This was also, if you will, a transformative experience for those who took part in it, and the intention was to activate local non-Jewish communities, local Polish towns where there's no longer any Jews there, to activate them and interest them in the synagogue in their town and in the local Jewish history of their town. And so this is in the White Star Synagogue in Wrocław. This is one of our workshops. It was a 2-week workshop with about 20 participants, students, and also experts, and they prepared a beautiful painted panel that would go above the bima. As a theater of history, we really used space to tell the story. We used narrative space. We try to immerse the visitor in the story, and we try to really create an experience that I think of as being memorable. To be memorable, it has to be emotional. To be worth remembering, it has to be thought-provoking, and we would like to inspire dialogue and debates around issues that are worth debating. And so we use this principle of first-person narration, narrating in the historical present, and it's very, very apparent in the Holocaust Gallery, because one of our objectives is to create a mode of narration and a narrative arc that avoids the teleology of the Holocaust. We have to be very careful in the way in which we present this 1,000-year history, that visitors do not have the feeling that it is driving inexorably towards genocide. And so our method of storytelling and our method of, I would say, the kind of historical narrative we construct works against that, I would say, foreshadowing and backshadowing that is rather more typical of the way in which the Holocaust is normally presented. What I can say is that the response has been enormous, that I think probably our peak visitation was more than 7,000 visitors in a single day. I think it was November 10th. And that we are getting, of course, the Polish public, but also, particularly as we move into the high season, groups that are coming from Israel, from March of the Living. We hope that for them this will be truly transformative, because we're hoping that they will begin their trip through Poland, which is largely focused on Holocaust sites, with this 1,000-year history, and that it will frame and shape and condition everything else that they do for the rest of the week or 10 days that they're in Poland.
Thank you, Barbara. One last question for you. If you could just address, what kind of research did the museum do amongst particularly younger Polish people and also Jews around the world in creating this narrative? And to what extent do you think the museum has anticipated the need to create a new 21st century audience for museums?
Oh, that's a great question. I wouldn't say that we have done systematic research across all the audience, all of our target audiences, but we have over the years done visitor surveys and really try to understand, for example, our local neighborhood, how the people living around us are responding to this great big new building and all the visitors that are coming. Their biggest concern, incidentally, was parking. But that aside, and there are, every couple of years, there are surveys of attitudes in Poland towards Jews, and we've tried also to use those surveys to get a sense of what people know about the museum that's coming, what they expect. But I wouldn't say that there's been anything systematic. However, there's been a lot of discussion and debate, there's been a lot in the press, and we do a lot of presentations where we learn a lot from the audience questions and feedback. And so I would say that for many, many years, when I presented the museum in the US and in Canada, I got very, from my point of view then, not so strange now, strange responses. For example, why are you building this museum in Poland? Now, of course, they wouldn't ask that about a Jewish museum in London or Philadelphia, but why in Poland? And the reason they're asking is they say, well, there are no Jews in Poland. Well, of course, that's not true. They say, why don't you build it in Tel Aviv or in New York? Well, the potential for transformation of building it in Tel Aviv or in New York is exponentially less than creating it here where the story happened, and where you have to come here to actually experience it in the very, very, very place. And we think that that has enormous, enormous potential for the audiences, if you will, that we would anticipate and hope to attract. So I would say that nothing systematic. We did not do systematic research, but we had a lot to work with in anticipating what our audiences would expect and how we would like to address those audiences and the kind of transformations that we would like to effect.
Thank you, Barbara. We'd like you to stay in the picture.
Sure.
And we're going to move on. We're actually going all the way from Poland. Just stick with us. We're going all the way from Poland now to right here in San Francisco. And we have with us Rabbi Noah Kushner, who is a great anticipator of change in Jewish life and in American life in general. And we've asked Noah Kushner, who founded The Kitchen, which he's going to tell you about, to come and join us. And primarily, I would love Noah to share with us what she shared with me. What was that moment of revelation she had as an ordained pulpit rabbi that she was going to create a different kind of way of Jewish? So please welcome Noah Kushner.
So I'm going to start at the beginning. My father was a rabbi in a synagogue for 30 years in Boston. He still is a rabbi here in San Francisco. And my husband is a rabbi at a large suburban synagogue in Marin. And I worked in synagogue life in Hillel on a campus for 13 years before starting the kitchen. So if anyone gets how hard congregational rabbis and Jewish professionals like yourself here in this room work, and some of the epic, classic institutional challenges they face, it's me. I speak institution, I get it. But about the time I was thinking about starting the kitchen a few years ago, when I looked around at the general Jewish landscape, I was typically the youngest person in the room by 20 years. I'm 44 now, I'm not 21. And Hugh has validated, we're going to hear more about this today, what we anecdotally know to be true, that there is a growing generational divide. And my generation, now many with grade school kids, younger generations, millennials, are voting with their feet. And they're simply often not in the room, in the Jewish rooms, in the same proportions as their parents and grandparents were. So here in San Francisco, unaffiliation rate for Gen X millennials runs about 90%.
Wow.
I'm not the first to speak of the graying of the Jewish community, and when I thought about the experience not only as a rabbi, but also as someone from my age cohort, I had some instincts about why they weren't coming. And so basically I sat in shul one day and I thought, I'm totally committed to this. I love this stuff. I'm married to a rabbi, I am a rabbi, I eat, sleep, and drink this stuff, but parts of this experience are a disconnect for me. So what's it like for those people who don't have the buy-in that I do? Is it any wonder that they're not showing up? And what would it take to reach more of them? So essentially these questions were the beginning of the kitchen. The kitchen is a startup community, an experimental community in San Francisco. I had no idea what I was getting into, I can honestly say that. The minute we had our first Shabbat, we started with just one Shabbat, and actually it was with license before they had a facility. And they said, how many people are going to come? We were going to host a dinner and some tefillah, some services. I said, I don't know, 40. That night, 150 people showed up, all of them Gen X, all millennials, and it keeps growing. 3.5 years in, we're planning for 800 for our high holidays, and we serve in the low thousands of people. So what is the kitchen and what's working? Kitchen started with the belief that Jewish religious experience is transformational, that it can change lives and make meaning and invest people in the world. And we sincerely believe that a Jewish act, and here I call it religious, but we've had this conversation, you can call it whatever you want. I actually think the words culture and religion are increasingly outdated, that people will use them in different ways in the same conversation. But whatever you want to call it, that Jewish act has the power to change the world and change the course of someone's life. We don't sit Shiva or argue over the meaning of Torah or witness art or light candles because it makes somebody else happy, it makes our parents happy. We don't pray or connect to Jewish ideas because we want to be socially acceptable or polite. We do it because it's literally a matter of making our lives meaning something. Because that's how we can actively be part of a larger story. How we can cultivate an Eden for ourselves, or an Egypt, or a Sinai, a place from which we can grow. So in other words, the Jewish software, the content, as we say out here, the experiences, the rituals, the Torah, it's essentially good. That's the good news. There's some bugs, but it's essentially good. But it's the hardware, the vehicles by which we're trying to transmit it, that's more than ready for an update. So I wanted to share a few of our early findings, the ways in which we try to update the hardware. The first one I'm going to call it irreverent reverence. And you can see these cards up here. This is one of the first things that we did, and we did this for very specific reasons. First, I was painfully aware that when someone walked into a typical Jewish setting, a religious setting, they would have these massive questions, what I call deal breakers, that got in the way of them even being able to experience whatever it was we had to offer. And so you'll see the questions here, like, what if I don't believe in God? What if I'm not Jewish? What if I don't agree with the prayers? And by not addressing these questions, we were boxing a lot of these people out of the room. Now, we couldn't give substantial answers to these questions on these little cards, but just outing the questions was significant. It messaged to people, if you have these questions, you belong. Come on in. As well, the voice of the kitchen, and you would see this on our website and in all our materials, it's purposefully like somebody you know and trust that you could talk to about stuff. It's the way we talk to each other. And I'm going to posit that many Jewish institutions, even if their content is risky, they have a voice online or in their materials that is safe and formal. And I wonder if that's the most effective way to get messages across. I'm convinced that finding this voice was primary to our success. It actually takes a lot more work to make something sound less official, but by being what we call irreverently reverent, we're communicating immediately and constantly that you don't have to check yourself at the door to be a part of something Jewish. And if you look at the card that's, let's flip it. There was a remote here.
Just use the arrow button.
Look at that. If you see on the upper left corner, one card that I'm going to share in particular. What if I'm not Jewish? Or what if my girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, wife, husband, child, Aunt Susie isn't Jewish? We said, let's not get hung up on who is Jewish or not. All that really matters is who wants to do Jewish or not. Put it this way, you could be a direct descendant of Moshe, but if you aren't interested in trying anything Jewish, the ride is pretty much over. By the same token, you could be Santa Claus himself. And if you decide to jump on the Jewish train and are open to seeing where it takes you, then the ride has just begun. I think it's worth pointing this out specifically because identity, especially here in San Francisco, is changing. People have multiple identities and they don't fit neatly in or outside a Jewish circle. And so you'll see what we emphasize at the kitchen is who wants to do Jewish. Being Jewish is secondary in the kitchen to be interested in participating in Jewish life. So it becomes immediately a self-selection. A second piece, and I'm not going to be able to go through all these cards, but they are available on our website. A second piece that I wanted to point out is we don't choose between content and access. You've got to have both. When I started building the kitchen, both my father and my husband told me the service that I was going to start leading, that I was testing with them, they said it's too much. Too much Hebrew, too much everything, you're going to overwhelm them, they will not come back. And they were, I'm happy to say, both wrong at the same time. It was actually an epic moment for me. We do pray at the kitchen in Hebrew, lots of it, but every single prayer is transliterated, every single word, we repeat a lot, the whole service is on SoundCloud, and at every single service you're going to hear me say something like, if this is new to you, that's okay. It's like yoga. In the beginning, yoga is the universal language in San Francisco. We are here to help, you know, and we make it very clear with the culture that if it feels like a challenge in the beginning, that that's normal, that that's okay. And when we teach Torah, when we teach in the classes, we are using very sophisticated ideas. We're taking positions that might not be common positions. We're opening it all up, but the idea is that that there is no question that's off limits. You can engage with something on a higher level, but you can have access to it. I think too many Jewish places are either rich in content, but basically feel like guarded fortresses, or they're welcoming, but once you're in, there's nothing of substance to be found. You've got to have both, access and content. I think when Gen X and millennials are voting against many Jewish institutions with their feet or simply walking by, they're not voting against being Jewish. They're voting against those places who have a culture and a formality, a kind of series of built-in protocols that's not in keeping with the way we interact with the world. So to say that Pew findings mean that these generations don't want Judaism would be like saying people don't wear gloves and hats and so they don't want clothes. We have to have rich content, but we have to assume that they're going to be coming in completely clean. And you're going to have to walk them up to that content almost with like a conspiratory whisper, like a best friend. Come on, you can come to this with compassion, like a good friend would. Two more points. One is something we've developed is say yes first. We intuited that one of the barriers to participation in Jewish life was that there were far too many institutional hoops to jump through in order to try something. So the kitchen is incredibly porous, and we have a ton of new people who are constantly coming through. Many of them have very little experience with the Jewish community. So when it comes to off-the-street requests, we have a culture of say yes first. I think that there are too many people, myself included, in the name of protecting our establishments and our institutions and our dignity, we've ruled out a lot of people and a lot of good ideas. This kind of relates to what Nina was saying. So my fictitious example would be that family that comes to me and says, we want a private bar mitzvah in Barbados in 6 weeks. So in my old world, with my more institutional hat on, before I started the kitchen, my eyes would have rolled so far back in my head, I would have fallen off my chair, gone into, had an aneurysm. But now my mantra is literally, dignity gets me nowhere. It's taken me a long time to come to this. If a Chabad rabbi is secure enough to drive around with a sukkah on the back of a pickup truck, I can at least engage the idea of teaching someone to read Torah in less time. bar mitzvah. So sometimes we can't do what they want. We have a staff of 3, including me. We find a compromise, but our goal is to open the door. Do whatever we can to open the door and not close it. Last point, I'm going to call it the heart and the arteries. We named the project the kitchen. Why? Part of it is subversive. The kitchen is the opposite of a cathedral. It's familiar and it's comfortable to all of us, even those of us like me who don't cook. The kitchen is where real conversations happen. It's where you roll up your sleeves and work together, and it's where everybody wants to be at a party. But there's another reason. I can say this part because we're not in Manhattan. Almost everyone has a kitchen. And I wanted, from the beginning, the message to be that you don't have to come into a certain building at a certain time to access meaning, justice, and God. In my world, I think we've become so dependent on communal spaces and gatherings that the independent exploration of the individual on her own terms, which is crucial for religion, and I would argue for art as well, the support of independent exploration, that part has become anemic. So it's clear to me in my world that if I create an organization where everybody thinks in order to feel holy, they have to come to me on a Friday night, and they have no divine experiences in any other place or time, I have indeed failed. I'll say it like this. There's the heart, which is the communal piece of it, and then there's the arteries. And in a healthy system, somebody gets charged up in a heart-like setting, and then they go out in the arteries, right? The blood goes out, there's some exploration that happens, some spontaneous, and it's got to come back. It's got to be a cycle. So we make a concentrated effort to help people self-organize in addition to the communal stuff that we do. And the community stuff is important. That's not all that we have. And in fact, we don't own a space. So we pervade secular, unexpected spaces regularly because we want to teach that Jewish space is everywhere. So we built our last sukkah at the Golden Gate Park in front of the Conservatory of Flowers. We had Purim last year in the middle of Chinatown at a giant karaoke situation. This year we were at the very non-hipster Rainforest Cafe. And so on. But we don't want Jewish to be just in a specific space. We want Jewish to be everywhere because that is how we live today. So I'll just close by saying that we think of ourselves as continually researching the best way to build Jewish life rather than being tied to a specific program. The whole thing is an experiment. And we're confident that although the what of the kitchen may continue to change, it will be so we can get closer to achieving the why we exist. And our ability really to serve more and more people. I'm rigorous about wanting to serve people in this time and this place. So I feel blessed to have the opportunity to build a kitchen. It's been by far the hardest and most religious experience in my life. Thank you.
An experience that enlightens and enlarges your world. Having aha moments. Something that takes you above your everyday life, it raises your awareness and uplifts you. Now, on first glance, these quotes could refer to a lot of different things, right? It could refer to Judaism, it could refer to a spiritual experience. But these quotes are actually how American consumers are defining culture today. And if we're thinking about being an anticipatory museum, right, an organization that's really going to evolve and pivot to meet the needs of its audiences, we have to listen to what they have to say and how they define culture. And that's what we're going to be doing for the next 10-15 minutes. So just a brief word of introduction. My name is Hill. I work at this firm called LaPlacaCohen. We do strategy design and advertising specifically for arts and culture organizations. And the core of what we do is really try to have a rigorous understanding of today's cultural audiences. And the way that we get at that is through this study called Culture Track. And what is Culture Track? Well, Culture Track is the largest national tracking study of cultural audiences in the States. We've fielded it 6 times since 2001, and it looks at a pool of about 4,000 American cultural consumers. So that means that they've been screened for attending at least one cultural event a year, and that can be defined from museums to performing arts organizations to going to a park or a botanical garden. And we really ask audiences 3 core questions. And the first is what? What are you doing culturally on a yearly basis? How? How are you engaging with these cultural activities both on and off-site? But most importantly, and really at the heart of our study, is why, right? What is in the hearts and minds of American cultural consumers today, and what drives them to participate in cultural activities? So diving right into the what, because this is really going to set our baseline and our competitive landscape. What we found is that participation has actually increased for a majority of art forms in the States, with a couple of notable exceptions. The good news is that it is a very good time to be a museum. I promise this is the kind of ugliest, most number-heavy chart you'll be seeing today, so bear with us. The important thing to take away from this is that the gray is 2011 and the pink is 2014. And what we see is that there are more increases than decreases. So that's a good thing, right? It means that people are participating in a wide variety of cultural activities. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we have science museums, history museums, art museums. Participation is going up. This is great news. But the flip side is that people are also defining culture really broadly today and are very active in this broadened cultural landscape. What does this mean? Well, it means that 8 out of 10 people actually define going to a national, state, or municipal park as a cultural activity, right? So for them, this is equivalent to saying, I'm going to spend my day at the museum, I'm going to go to the theater tonight, this is my cultural activity. 2/3 of people are actually defining food and drink experiences as a cultural activity. Maybe without a surprise, this is driven by millennials, right? So going to a food truck festival, going to a restaurant, this is culture. 41% define watching a live or recorded lecture online. This could be at home, in bed, in their pajamas, still a cultural activity. And you have half of people defining non-commercial television as a cultural activity as well. This, when you really stop and think about it, maybe isn't that surprising, because TV has so much cultural cachet now, right? Like, you want to be able to engage in conversations about Downton Abbey, about Sherlock. And believe it or not, people are actually factoring this into their decision-making for attending cultural activities. And what we have found is that although audiences are attending this wider variety of cultural activities, which is obviously a wonderful thing for those of us that work in the creative industries, frequency is down. So this is sort of the flip side. I'm going to ask you to look at the right-hand column here. So as you can see, in 2007, you have 31% of people attending 3 or more cultural activities in a month. In 2014, that number is down to 15. So that's cut in half in only 7 years. So people are attending a wider range of activities, but they're actually doing it much less frequently. And what this results in, and I apologize in advance for the next few slides, is that loyalty continues to decline. And I think we all can expect what we're about to see, but it always hurts, so everyone kind of take a deep breath. So this is 2011. We have 26% of people saying that they hold visual arts memberships, and 23% saying they hold a performing arts subscription. This is where we are now. Now this is 3 years. So that's actually incredibly dramatic that we see this dip from 26% to 15%, from 23% to 10%. So what does this mean, right? Well, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that people are hyper-connected and hyper-active and therefore are completely not loyal, you can't pin them down. But when we look outside of the arts world, we realize that actually isn't true, right? Because brand loyalty is stronger than ever. Apple, for example, with the iPhone, or Starbucks. So people are loyal, and the question now is really, how do we tap into that essential motivation and rejigger what we're doing in the arts, right? Maybe the question now is not, what sort of band-aid can we put on our membership program? What new initiative can we take? Maybe the question now is, okay, this is the challenge, what's next? So how are people engaging with cultural activities? In the interest of time, we're going to really take this moment to talk about technology, because I know that it's something that's super top of mind for everyone, that we're all very interested in learning more about. So the question here is, how are audiences engaging with technology on-site in a cultural experience? To set a baseline, and this is probably unsurprising, ownership of mobile devices has absolutely skyrocketed since 2011. So we have 31% of people owning a smartphone in 2011. We're already up to 66% by 2014. And it's even more dramatic for a tablet, which has nearly tripled in size. So when we fielded Culture Track and we were kind of sitting, twiddling our thumbs, waiting for the results, I think we were already starting to draft in our mind all of the slides we were going to write about all these different activities that people were doing with their phones on site. And we were actually very surprised. What we found is that few people are actually using their mobile devices on site right now to experience a cultural activity, despite how many think pieces you're reading about in the New York Times. So as you can see, the bars on the left are the number of people who own devices, and the bars on the right are people who are actually using them on site at a cultural experience. So while you have 2/3 of people who own a smartphone, only 20% are using these devices on site. And this is really interesting. We kind of think that two things could be happening here. One option is that people really see culture and cultural experiences as like a cold spot, right? An opportunity for them to disconnect and unplug and have a more deep, meaningful, in-person experience. Then there's the other option, which I think we're more inclined to believe is the case, which is that people haven't encountered technology and cultural organizations yet that really speak to their needs and desires, right? There are a lot of apps out there, but unless it actually engages with what people are seeking from a cultural experience in particular, it's not necessarily going to boost their time at a museum or at a theater, and so they're saying, you know what, I'm not going to bother. And so we really think of this as being a transitional moment for using technology and cultural experiences. Because in the end, the audience is going to be the one that leads the way in defining the new norms by really articulating what it is that they need from technology and culture. Just to kind of predict where that direction might go, one thing that we did find is pictures ring, right? This is a selfie moment, and people are all about taking and sharing photos on their phones. As you can see, for those who do use a mobile device on site, 2/3 of them are taking photos, and half of them are then sharing those photos. And surprisingly, this is actually even higher than, say, using a search engine to do a quick Google search on a piece of art, or even social media activity, which falls relatively low. So thinking about moments to activate photos is actually a very simple, actionable way to tap into audiences' desires for technology. And finally, why? If we're thinking about being an anticipatory museum, right, the key question we have to answer is why do audiences participate in culture, and how can we continue to activate ourselves to respond to them in the most powerful and impactful way? So cultural audiences are seeking both entertainment and enlightenment, and we like to say that you don't get to cheat, right? They're two ends of the spectrum, but they have to go together. And what we found is also that it's less about being in the know in the end than it is about being with whom you know. So social, social, social. You can see the top two motivators to making culture a part of one's life are entertainment and enjoyment, right? I love it, I'm entertained, it's delightful, and spending time with friends and family. All the way on the right-hand side, we see being in the know, which is actually decreased. And so this is kind of an inspirational take on today's society. And then looking at the younger generations in particular, a really interesting finding here. The younger you are, the more a cultural event is about escaping stress, right? So we like to think of this as what we call a drop shoulder experience. So if you think about everyone who's running around and they're so stressed and they have their shoulders up to here, right? A museum is the drop shoulder experience. And it's always important to bear in mind what people are bringing with them when they walk in their doors. And for young people, it's a heck of a lot of stress. And they're really looking to culture as a way to escape and enjoy. And another interesting insight about millennials, believe it or not, almost 1/2 won't even attend a cultural event if they can't find someone to go with. And this is really distinctive, this stands out, as you can see, millennials at the top bar. This is a really unique characteristic, but it's one that's essential to keep in mind, because every program has a social component. Are there maybe benefits that you give for when someone brings a friend? This is where your youngest generation is coming from. And so what's the opportunity here, right? We've very very quickly trudged through a lot of data, and I promise there is much more where that came from on our website. But what are the steps that we can take to really address these unique challenges that arise from today's cultural audiences? Well, the first one is really about blurring boundaries, right? Audiences today don't see the traditional disciplinary boundaries that we've always acted upon, and so there's such an opportunity to think outside of the box, right? And to share. The days of being siloed are really over. There is such an opportunity, especially on a day like today, to collaborate and to learn with one another and to really share knowledge and experience. Build trust, right? We live in a sharing economy now, and people really expect to trust the organizations that they engage with. So there's an opportunity to get to know your audiences and not only have them trust you, but trust them and trust what they can bring to the table in a cultural experience. Be essential. This is the cutting through the noise part, and this is what we really have to take from the expanding definition of culture, right? Because if Sherlock and Downton Abbey are now in your competitive landscape of cultural experiences, it's as important of a time as ever to really establish your unique voice and offer for your audiences. Build a home, right? In this kind of increasingly disrooted and online world, there is such an opportunity to be what we might call a third place, right? A place that's not home, a place that's not work, but really just a civic, social space to provide an opportunity for people to come together and share. Redefine loyalty. I have to say, we get such pleasure out of when we present this study on the same stage as someone that we feel is really activating the best practices of how to react to this data, and that's why it was so fantastic to learn about the kitchen. This is a perfect example of people not being less loyal, but wanting to have relationships on new and different terms, right? And the question is, how can we redefine our loyalty offer to make people feel like they are welcomed by the organization and like they play an active role in their loyalty to that organization? Think holistically. This is about really activating all of the senses, right? So a perfect example is the Why It's Not About Post here, right? People are thinking of food as culture. People are thinking of a wide variety of sensory experiences, just being outside in the park as culture. So how can we think holistically, even if we're a museum, about how we touch all of the different senses in our experience? Activate everything. Right? Everything is a gallery. Your garden can be a gallery. Your YouTube channel can be a gallery. Your restaurant can be a gallery. There is such an opportunity to activate every space and have it really tell your unique story. Transport, right? I think particularly as Jewish museums, we have such a unique opportunity to give people an experience that lifts them above their everyday life. And the best part is that's what they're looking for. Right? They're looking for culture to transport them and to lift them up. And finally, delight them. Right? This is the entertainment. People are looking to have fun. They're stressed out, they're crazed, and they want to be able to walk into your museum and know that it's going to be a surprising and delightful experience. So there's much more where this came from. You can download our full top-line report as well as all of the pages of supporting data at LaPlacaCohen.com/culturetrack. And thank you very much.